Sunday, my children! We spend so much time watching horror movie monsters during their busiest seasons that we often forget that they have to do things in between slashings. So come on down to Wilmhurst. It's where monsters lie. A group of children escape from a murderer's house and flee to the neighboring one, hoping to get help from the old lady inside. But the old lady just stabs one, lets a ventriloquist dummy slash another, and finally a giant man in a skull mask crushes the last. The boys have been fleeing from Professor Puzzleman, and the old lady berates him. It's against the rules to kill people in the gated community, too risky for exposure. Puzzleman thinks that they got them all, but one child manages to escape and flee. The next morning, at a community meeting, we meet the residents of the place. Professor Puzzleman, of course, Richard the Clown, Pack Rat, Ventriloquist Pearl and her dummy Frankie, the giant with the skull mask, aka Daniel Dawson, Saint Julian, the old lady, Zell, and her son, Wyatt, and of course, the F-Master. Not saying his full name, my children. I can't use such language in your presence. Anyway, more serial killers. And finally, Grandpa Murder and his nephew. Zell has to deal with so many problems with this neighborhood she runs on behalf of the devil. Grandpa needs to move into a new house because his is infested with fleas. Richard the Clown wants to use a flamethrower, even though his whole thing is being a clown. The Puzzle Master's puzzles have gotten stale, mostly just revolving around dicks, and Richard puts out his garbage wrong, which is an HOA violation. Homeowners associations are the real evil people here. Aside from all the evil people. Grandpa moving into a new home is equally an issue. His nephew is what Zell calls a shape, in the vein of Michael Myers. Problem is, Daniel Dawson is also a shape, and two shapes instinctively want to fight and kill each other. Grandpa promises to keep him indoors so that won't happen, but the real problem? The F-Master has been ordering new materials. Axes, lawnmowers, chainsaws. But in reality, he's just taken up gardening. It seems that lawn care gives him the same kind of feeling that murdering people with those instruments does, so he's lost his bloodlust. Oh, but they have bigger issues coming soon. The child who got away, Linus, meets with Special Agent Connor Hayes, an FBI agent who has been tracking down such serial killers for years now. When Linus informs him about the old lady and the big guy with black hair covering his face, it really gets his attention. And he brings pretty much the entire police precinct with him to take them all down. We soon see Connor's special interest in all this. 20 years ago, he was at a county fair where Daniel Dawson murdered everyone, leaving him the only survivor. And in the orphanage afterwards, he got a scar thanks to Saint Julian, once again connecting himself to the killers. Linus identifies the house where it all happened, granting them some legal position for his men to move in. Unfortunately, despite his attempts to keep them safe, moving in groups, never splitting up, and assume each house has a serial killer in it, the slashers make very short work of the police, slaughtering them while he converses with Zell. Even Frankie gets in on the action, revealing that Pearl was a former survivor of his massacre, and that the puppet is alive. He knows about Zell, how she used to run a motel in the 60s, and how she seems to have not aged a day since then. But in turn, she says she knows about him. They keep track of all their final girls. Still, while the individual officers are getting taken down, Connor has spent his whole life training for this moment, killing the Pack Rat, Pearl, Frankie, and Richard in quick succession. F-Master had actually sat out the whole thing, content to hide, until one of the policemen tramples his garden. Then he brings out the lawnmower dead alive style. Never get between a man and his begonias. Wyatt releases the family dog on some of the remaining cops. Baphomet, a giant canine that devours them. Linus, unfortunately, finds himself back in the lair of Puzzleman, who forces him into a saw trap of either cutting off his penis or cutting off his hand. He very quickly chooses his hand and runs, eventually coming back with a flamethrower to dispense with the Puzzleman, though passes out from blood loss. Connor manages to kill Saint Julian, coming face to face with Daniel Dawson, and gets his ass kicked. As Zell said, you'd need a tank to take him down. But fortunately for him, Grandpa Murder sent his nephew out to retrieve some human meat for cooking, making the chainsaw-wielding cannibal run right into Dawson and forcing them to fight each other from their murderous rage. It allows Nephew to kill Dawson while Connor puts a bullet in Nephew and Grandpa. Zell apparently made sure the neighborhood had a self-destruct on hand, so before a horde of what appeared to be zombies come crawling out of it, the place is blown up. Connor is berated over the massacre, especially since he didn't follow the proper procedure in handling this. It doesn't help that an entire police department has been slaughtered and his witness missing, presumed dead. He is likely to be fired pending a review of the situation. He goes home to his fiancée, only to be captured by Zell and Wyatt, who reveal that said fiancé is actually Wyatt's long-lost daughter. The fiancé, Ella, is pregnant, and while she didn't know about the plans of the rest of the killers, she does know who they are and can't just separate herself from her family. Zell explains that they let Connor escape originally as a child, wanting to create more killers as they went, and Connor, in their eyes, is just as much a killer as the ones he defeated. So they give him a choice: join them to raise a family with Ella, or his child will grow up fatherless. He asks where they would go, and she says to Wheelhurst 2, where we see Linus awakening, his arm bandaged, with F-Master and Baphomet near him.
Will Connor join them as their new maniac cop? What sort of other evil slashers and monsters await in the new planned community? Well, that's for another mini-series, my children.